Welcome to Property Addicts Australia, your home for everything property investing. Get an insider's view of what really works when building a portfolio. Learn how to avoid the common mistakes, plus get all the tips and tricks from the property investing experts Sana and Mona Ali. Join us to learn from the experts and set yourself up for long-term success in property investing. Proudly powered by propertytwins.com.au.
Welcome to the Property Addicts Australia podcast. We are Sana and Mona Ali, the Property Twins. We are investment-savvy mortgage brokers and buyer's agents. We help clients all over Australia build investment property portfolios. In this episode, we'll be talking about the average and median super balances, what motivates people to buy property in their super, and what they need to know before they start the property purchase process. We will also be sharing the key steps required to borrow money in your super to buy property and the key mistakes we see people make. When our clients come to us, they have common drivers for investing in property. Many of them are looking for a more fulfilling life, avoiding the 9 to 5, 48 weeks of the year, spending time with their family. Maybe one of their partners even stopping to work at some point in time in the future. They want to be able to maintain the same quality of lifestyle in retirement and ultimately have a passive income to support them. They do realize that doing nothing will result in a much more difficult retirement in the future.
They realize that doing nothing will lead to insufficient income in their retirement. So there's a bit of a realization that they may not actually have a comfortable retirement down the track if they don't take action. And also they find that they have already maxed out on their borrowing capacity in their personal name. So they want to utilize super to be able to buy property.
Generally, there's a realization that super alone on its own is not sufficient. So because of that, many people think of buying property in their super fund. And many times we hear from our clients, the reason they're thinking of property in super is being able to access leverage, which is otherwise not possible.
So every family's circumstances are different. So quality of lifestyle will vary between various families. But if we were to look at average super balances, as per Deloitte as of 30th of June 2022, men aged between 60 and 64, their average super balance was about $322,000. And for women of similar age, it was about $247,000. So for a couple, this would total $570,000. Looking at, living costs, assuming the mortgage is paid off, if you are spending $5,000 a month on your household living expenses and say you're allowing $1,000 a month for discretionary spend, all up $6,000 a month, over a 12-month period, that's about $72,000 needed to be able to run a household. So now you have to wonder, right, how long will this last? So $570,000 may last you around about 8 years or so if we ignore the capital growth in your portfolio. For a comfortable retirement, Association of Super Funds of Australia, the average balance required to have a comfortable lifestyle is about $70,500 a year as well, which will last you about 8 years. So you need to weigh up once you have used up that money, say in about 8 years, how are you going to continue on with a quality lifestyle? So far, we've only really looked at an average balance between a couple being $570,000. When you look at the median balances, the story is even worse because we are looking at a median balance of $316,000. So if you have $316,000 in your super as a couple, assuming about $70,000 odd a year of living expenses, this will last you just over 4 years. So you need to weigh up what is actually going to happen after you have actually used up that money.
That's where people dream about property as a vehicle to purchase in their superannuation fund and be able to access leverage. What we find is when it comes to buying property in super, what we find is many investors are confused as to what are the exact steps. It's not as well known or practiced in the finance industry. And people want to know what the steps are to buying property in super.
And also the finance process can be quite complex because of the number of entities involved and number of stakeholders. You need to make sure that you are getting the right name on the contract of sale, for example. There's a lot of moving parts to it, which needs to be managed effectively for you to be able to buy property in super. So for PAYG employees, your employer would make super contributions to an industry fund such as Australian Super, Host Plus, HESTA, to name a few. And these super funds at times have millions of members and they make decisions on behalf of their members. You, as a member, do not have any control over the investments they are making on your behalf. Whereas, on the other hand, self-managed super funds is just that. It is self-managed. You make decisions in line with your investment strategy, and you have to comply with the super regulations and act in the best interest of the members. So whilst investments for industry funds are managed by whoever runs the large super funds, with a self-managed super fund, you are making decisions in line with your investment strategy. And it means that you are also able to buy property in a self-managed super fund using your super balance as deposit and purchase costs, along with borrowing money to fund the property purchase.
So when people buy property in super, they're looking for diversification. Industry funds are mainly focused on purchasing stocks and managed funds, as opposed to with buying property in your super, you have your own investment strategy. You can select the property. You get to access a tangible asset with rental income, which is steady over a period of time. Also, you need to talk to your tax accountant about the tax benefits that come with purchasing property in super. The capital gains tax in super is 10%, which is substantially lower than when you buy property in your own name.
The key driver for people with buying property through super is really the leverage. You being able to borrow money, say about 80% of the value of the property, and buying a property. Otherwise, say hypothetically, you have $200,000 in your super balance. It grows 10%. You make about $20,000. On the other hand, you use these $200,000 to purchase a $600K property, and that property grows in value by 10%, you make $60,000. So as you can see, leverage gives access to 3 times the returns than you would have had otherwise.
What you need to be mindful is that property industry is unregulated. There are property spruikers who sell properties for self-managed super funds. These properties can be overpriced and may not achieve the same capital growth and cash flow that you can otherwise achieve. You also need to know that lending regulations could change when it comes to buying in super, and also government regulations could change. You may buy property in super today, but it may not be allowed in the future. So it's about really seizing that opportunity to leverage and access your super fund to purchase property.
And when people max out borrowing capacity in their own names, this could be another avenue for them to be able to continue expanding their property portfolio. But what we find is most people are actually confused because there's not that many brokers who specialize in this space or are able to provide the guidance on actually the exact steps that need to happen for you to be able to execute this plan.
But it's important to take action because setting up a super fund and finding a property can take time. So make sure you start that process because it can take 3 to 6 months between when you start and settle on a property.
Whilst many people are confused with the exact steps they need to take to buy a property through super, the first step actually really is getting your team together and the right team together. Number one, you need a mortgage broker who knows how self-managed super fund lending actually works. They will be able to work out your borrowing capacity and rental return that you need to target and effectively give you a breakdown of the numbers so you can confidently make offers. And then you need an accountant who can help set up a self-managed super fund and also the bare trust, which actually buys the property on the super fund's behalf. So you need to make sure that your accountant is well versed in the exact steps that need to happen from an accounting standpoint.
Well, make sure you also have a financial planner on board because they'll be the ones advising you on your investment strategy. A property buyer's agent can help you with the search, selection, and negotiation of high growth and cash flow properties. And lastly, a conveyancer and a solicitor, not just to manage the sale process, but with self-managed super fund, you need a lawyer to review your loan documents. So make sure you have your team lined up to get the process started.
So it's actually vital to get the right solicitor on board because they need to actually understand the super fund purchases. They need to be able to advise on the right names that need to go on the contract of sale, because what you don't want is having to pay stamp duty twice just because you've got those details wrong.
When it comes to buying property in your super, there's a few steps you need to take. Firstly, determine what's your why. What's important about buying property in your super? Next, figure out what funds you need for the purchase price that you are considering, and do you have the super fund balance to actually get started? Then look at your borrowing capacity and the rental return you need and the serviceability for that purchase. Set up your self-managed super fund and then apply for a pre-approval for your purchase.
Once you've worked out your goal, you need to work out the purchase price you would be targeting and the funds required to complete that purchase. To be able to purchase in super, you will need about a 20% deposit. So for a $600,000 property, you need about $120,000. Then you need stamp duty. In New South Wales, the stamp duty is about 22 grand for a 600K purchase. Plus, you will need some funds for building and pest inspections or any other electrical inspections that you might be undertaking, say allow $3,000 for that. You may also need to put aside money for a buyer's agent, but excluding the buyer's agency fees, you are looking at about $145,000 to be able to fund a property worth $600,000. However, some states actually have higher stamp duties. For example, Victoria and South Australia stamp duties are much higher, so you will need some extra funds there.
You also need to be mindful of the liquidity requirements, right? Some lenders have liquidity requirements where they need you to have at least 5% of your loan amount left as cash or other liquid assets in your super fund. So let's say you're buying a 600K property at 80% loan to value ratio with your loan being $480,000. 5% of that is about $24,000 in cash or other liquid assets needs to be left in your super fund. So as you mentioned, $145K plus $24,000, about $170K approximately is what's required to secure a 600K property. And that includes deposits, stamp duty, legals, other buying costs like building and pest, as well as your 5% liquidity. Not all lenders need that, but it's something to be mindful of because you will have maintenance costs for the property. You might have vacancy at some point in time. So you need to make sure you're maintaining some buffers in your super fund upon purchase.
So the next step is to work out borrowing capacity for the super fund. So your mortgage broker will help you in figuring that out, provided they specialize in super fund lending. So say if you are a PAYG employee, they'll take into account your employer super guarantee contributions. If you're self-employed, typically we would look at last 2 years of contributions that you have made to your super fund. Then there is rental income for the proposed property that's taken into account. Any money that's left over after you've completed the purchase also helps with borrowing capacity because lenders tend to apply a notional return on investment on those funds. And lastly, you need to know that your personal liabilities are actually not taken into account when working out the super borrowing capacity.
As next steps, your accountant will help you set up your super fund. And once that's done, you're ready to apply for your pre-approval. As Property Twins, what we do with our clients is get on a 15-minute initial phone call to find out what your goals are and what's important to you about investing in your super fund. We collect some basic information like your job details, your income, payslip, and your super statement. This helps us put together a series of options that you can consider for your super fund purchase. And we catch up to go through each of these options with you. Once we have consulted and discussed and decided on one of the lenders you will go with, we will then prepare your pre-approval application and help with the lending side of things.
And it's important to note that you actually have an understanding of your borrowing capacity before you even set up the self-managed super fund because it's quite a costly exercise to be able to do that. Imagine if you've gone and set up the super fund, but you're unable to purchase the right property, then it will be a wasted exercise.
And once you have that pre-approval sorted, then you can start your property search.
So before deciding on the budget for your super fund purchase, you need to do your cash flow analysis. This will be based on your employer contributions, any voluntary super contributions you make, rental income. So you need to take all these into account and see if these are sufficient to be able to fund the principal and interest repayments, any accounting fees required for the super fund, running costs of the property, insurances, and also any lender fees and charges. This is so that you avoid injecting cash yourself into the super fund.
And the type of property you'll be purchasing will really come down to your risk profile. The age of the property could contribute to the maintenance costs. So it's important to find a balance between the age of the property, the purchase price, and the rental income, so the property is able to sustain itself in your super fund.
The most common challenges that we see is people aren't so attached to their super. It's kind of inaccessible for a very, very long time. But ultimately, it is your money that you are putting aside for your future. And also, given the nature of it, it is prone to spookers being able to access it and getting you to invest in wrong asset classes.
Depending on how many years to your retirement, time might fix a bad property purchase because you weren't so attached to your super, but why lose money when you can make good quality investment decisions and buy quality properties in your super fund?
I'd like to share a story about one of our clients who came to us after they had already purchased a property through their self-managed super fund. So many years ago, they purchased a brand new property in their self-managed super fund, which didn't do much for quite some time. There was no capital growth for that property for a number of years. And it turned out they had actually purchased it through their financial planner, who may have been paid hefty commissions on the back end. These clients wanted to buy a second investment property in their super fund, and they asked the financial planner for transparency around the commissions that they were actually getting paid. And the financial planner actually refused to share that information to them. So the key concern they had was lack of transparency and undisclosed commissions. Eventually, they ended up working with us as their buyer's agents and mortgage brokers to purchase another property in their self-managed super fund, which has grown in a rising Brisbane market. To sum it up, earlier in this episode, we spoke about median super balances, which was about $316,000 for a couple at retirement. So imagine you being in those shoes if you had that balance, and average living expenses for a comfortable retirement were $70,000 per annum. This money would only really last you 4.5 years, ignoring any capital growth in the portfolio.
So what happens when you've used up these funds? And that's where buying property in your super or your personal names comes in. An asset which can give you leverage as well as access to much more equity than just the median average of $316K balance in your super fund at retirement.
Thank you for listening. Join us next time for another episode of Property Addicts Australia podcast.
Thanks for listening to Property Addicts Australia. For future episodes, click follow. Leaving a review helps others find the podcast. And for more information about how we can help you, visit propertytwins.com.au.